The night my friend's mother appeared at my door, rain-soaked and trembling under the porch light, I felt the ground of my ordinary life crack open. Her eyes were red, her hands shaking as if they had carried too much for too long, and though no words were spoken aloud, everything about her presence screamed that something irreversible had already happened. She stood there like someone who had crossed a line she could never uncross, like someone who knew she should not be there and yet had nowhere else left to go. In that instant, before I even understood why she had come, I sensed that both our lives were about to change in ways neither of us was prepared for. Before the story goes any further, take a second and pause with me. If you believe in kindness, in second chances, in the quiet moments when doing the right thing can change everything, please like this video, share it with someone who needs hope, leave a comment, and subscribe to the channel. Your support keeps stories like this alive. My name is Nathan Walker, and I was living in a small rental house on the edge of Cedar Falls, Iowa, trying to rebuild my life piece by piece. I had lost my job at a manufacturing plant months earlier, my savings were thinning, and most nights were spent staring at the ceiling wondering how a man could do everything right and still end up feeling like a failure. My closest friend, Lucas Reed, had moved away for work, leaving behind a silence I was not used to. His mother, Margaret Reed, was someone I had always respected from a distance, the kind of woman who held her family together with calm hands and steady faith. Seeing her at my door that night felt unreal, like a scene from someone else's movie bleeding into my own. Margaret had always been strong, the kind of strength that never asked for attention. She volunteered at the church pantry, baked casseroles for grieving families, and carried herself with dignity even when life pressed hard. But that night, she looked smaller somehow, folded inward by a weight she could no longer bear alone. I ushered her inside without questions, noticing how she flinched at every sound, how her gaze kept drifting toward the door as if she expected the past to come knocking after her. The house smelled of old coffee and rain, and the silence between us felt heavy but necessary, like the deep breath before a storm breaks. Over the next hours, the truth unraveled slowly, not through spoken words but through her expressions, her tears, the way her shoulders shook when she finally sat at my kitchen table. Margaret's marriage had collapsed under years of quiet disappointment and unspoken pain. Her husband, Robert, a man everyone admired, had lived a double life of control and cruelty behind closed doors. When she finally gathered the courage to leave, the world she thought would support her turned cold. Friends chose sides, family urged forgiveness without understanding the cost, and the church she served questioned her resolve. She walked out with nothing but a small bag and a heart full of guilt for choosing herself for once. As the night deepened, I felt my own struggles shrink in comparison, yet somehow intertwine with hers. I had been drowning in self-pity, convincing myself that losing a job defined my worth. Margaret's presence forced me to see suffering in a different light, to understand that survival sometimes meant stepping into uncertainty without a map. Still, helping her was not simple. I barely had enough to cover my own rent, let alone support someone else. Fear whispered that offering shelter could drag me further under, but another voice, quieter and steadier, reminded me that compassion rarely arrives at a convenient time. Days turned into weeks, and Margaret stayed. She slept in the spare room, waking early to make coffee and pray softly by the window. Slowly, color returned to her face. She found small ways to contribute, cooking meals, cleaning, offering encouragement when my job searches ended in rejection. Yet the challenges kept coming. Robert demanded she return, using guilt and scripture as weapons. Rumors spread through town, painting her as unstable, ungrateful. I watched her wrestle with doubt, watched her question her own worth, and in those moments, I saw my own reflection. We were both learning how easy it was to believe the worst about ourselves when others insisted on it. One afternoon, after yet another failed interview, I came home ready to give up. Margaret was in the living room, sorting through old photographs she had finally retrieved from her sister's house. She looked up at me with a tired smile, one filled with empathy rather than pity. In that moment, something shifted. I realized that helping her had given my days meaning again. Her resilience inspired me to keep trying, to see my setbacks not as endings but as redirections. Without ever saying it out loud, we were healing each other. The turning point came unexpectedly. A local community center was looking for a maintenance supervisor, a position that required honesty more than experience. Margaret encouraged me to apply, insisting that my character mattered more than my resume. I got the job. Around the same time, she was offered a small administrative role at a nonprofit supporting women leaving abusive situations. The irony was not lost on either of us. Life, it seemed, had a way of circling back when given the chance. Still, the emotional scars remained. Margaret struggled with nights filled with fear, and I battled the lingering shame of feeling like I had fallen behind in life. But together, we faced those shadows. We attended counseling sessions, leaned into faith rather than fear, and learned to forgive ourselves for surviving. The house that once felt like a temporary shelter became a place of renewal, filled with laughter, shared meals, and a quiet understanding that brokenness did not mean being beyond repair. As months passed, Lucas returned to visit. The reunion was emotional, layered with relief and gratitude. He saw the strength in his mother's eyes, the steadiness in her voice, and the unexpected bond between us. There was no jealousy, no suspicion, only appreciation for the way strangers can become family through shared trials. Margaret eventually moved into her own small apartment nearby, but the connection remained. We had become witnesses to each other's rebirth. Just before this story reaches its end, I want to ask you something special. Please take a moment to comment below and share what kindness or second chances mean to you. Your words matter more than you know. The last time Margaret came to my door, it was on a sunny afternoon. She stood taller, lighter, carrying a loaf of homemade bread and a smile that reached her eyes. As she left, I realized how far we had both come from that rain-soaked night. Her decision to show up, despite believing she should not have, had altered the course of 2 lives. It reminded me that sometimes the bravest thing a person can do is ask for help, and the most powerful thing another can do is say yes. If this story touched your heart, if it reminded you of the quiet power of compassion and the beauty of starting over, please like, share, and engage with this video. Your support helps these stories find the people who need them most. And remember, sometimes the door you open for someone else becomes the doorway to your own healing.